You feel a rumbling beneath your feet, and an ancient terror grips your heart. The creature has awoken from its centuries of sleep, and its hunger cannot be stopped. The hillside below you erupts, tossing you and your compatriots to the side as the beast rampages toward Wraithengard. Its hardened scales crash into the city walls, and only a moment passes before the structure buckles completely. The creature cuts a swath through the city as you move to catch it. Wraithengard is doomed, the countryside is doomed, and the material plane itself is in danger. The Tarrasque is upon you. Welcome to Monster Manual Mondays, a show where I take a dive into the origin and past of monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, as well as give some tips on how to best use them in your game. We're starting with one of the most threatening beasts out there, the Tarrasque. The Tarrasque's origins hail from France, Provence to be specific, and unsurprisingly from a town called Tarrasque. The story goes that Saint Martha, Lazarus' sister, fled to Tarrasque and encountered a frightening beast when she got there. A forest near the town was under attack by La Tarrasque, with many travelers who attempted to cross the river Rhône in the forest being eaten by the creature. The closest comparison in look made by Jacobus de Varagine in his Golden Legend was that the Tarrasque was a type of dragon. People today wouldn't call the Tarrasque a dragon, as its original design was much stranger. It was fatter than an ox, longer than a horse, with a lion's face and head. Teeth as sharp as swords, a horse's mane, its back as sharp as an axe. Bristling and piercing scales, 6 feet with bear's claws, a serpent's tail, and a shell on either side like a tortoise. I adore the creativity of old folklore writers when they come up with monsters. It's always an amalgamation of like 6 different animals, and they aren't designed in the same way that modern monsters frequently are, with a purpose to look cooler than all the other monsters on the market. Anyway, Martha shows up, subdues the Tarrasque with her girdle and some holy water, because God and virginity and all that medieval stuff, and the townsfolk decide to kill the monster, which had killed some of their own, even though it was fully pacified and went peacefully. The townspeople apparently felt bad and decided to name their town Tarasque after the slain creature. Tarasque still exists, and the classical Tarrasque has been their mascot since at least 1461. With festivals celebrating the creature running up until the current day. These festivals were absolutely nuts. 5 people got inside of this thing, with 4 of them moving it and one of them manning its head and mouth, because this thing could absolutely chomp at you in the crowd or whip around its whole body to hit you with its tail. This type of audience danger was actually a main part of the draw of the festival, with the chant, "Ah que ben fait, la Tarasque a rue un pré," or "Oh, that's well done, the Tarrasque has smashed an arm," being cheered at the festival. There were 2 festivals, one where there were true festivities, which was a secular festival just celebrating the monster itself, as well as a more religious festival in which the Tarrasque effigy was led by a woman dressed as Saint Martha through the town. The first edition Tarrasque doesn't hold the same awesome might that the versions of later editions would. It still is an absolute brute of a creature, but several of the Tarrasque's key features don't come into being until 2nd edition. Also, the art for this one, as for many first edition monsters, is just doofy looking. The lack of anything in the image, pose-wise or by the scale of another creature, to impose the sheer size and threat of the Tarrasque on the viewer hinders the effect that the monster could have. In 2nd edition, the Tarrasque was definitely terrifying stat-wise, with many of its key features finding their origin in this edition. This is where you can only kill it after you've slain it and then also use a wish spell. This is where it gains the ability to deflect spells and to regenerate health. The art for this edition is better than First Ed, but not by too much. The posture is far too human-like for my tastes, and the shading and bristles imply fur instead of a hardened shell or scales. Also, the fucking tree trunk of a neck, plus the strange fuzziness of its mud, just makes this thing look like Rob Liefeld decided to try and draw a dog from memory. The 3rd edition Tarrasque is pretty much perfect, in both design and mechanics. And on the design side, Wizards definitely agreed. This is basically the new normal for the Tarrasque. They found the perfect aesthetic, and they decided to keep it. Stat-wise, on the other hand, the Tarrasque went through quite a few changes. 3.5 sees the creature have everything it's ever had. It had fully 5 attacks a turn, regeneration 40, spell reflection, as well as spell resistance, damage reduction 15, swallow whole, the whole bit. This was one fearsome creature. And in 4th edition, they disrespectfully put it in the abominations section of the monster manual instead of giving it its own page, while also toning it back significantly. No longer is spell reflection a thing, nor is its regeneration or swallow whole. It has a new aura which prevents people from flying near it, which is cool, I guess, but it doesn't really do anything to make it the truly intimidating monster it should be. It just plays like a flesh sack that you have to wail on and hit over and over until it's dead. The 5e Tarrasque is a good middle ground, not regaining its regeneration or its wild expanded criticals from 3.5, but getting most of its major flavor features back, such as Frightful Presence, Swallow Whole, as well as gaining a new great feature in Siege Monster. Siege Monster makes the Tarrasque deal double damage to structures, which cements its role as a horrific creature that destroys everything in its wake, not just people. The Tarrasque is a terrifying monster which impresses upon the player just how small and feeble they are, and therefore how incredible they are when they are able to defeat it against all odds. In an effective campaign, this creature should inspire the players to compare who their characters were at the start of everything to who they are now, both mechanically and emotionally. The Tarrasque in 5e should be used in a situation where it gets to make use of its new trait, Siege Monster, to its fullest, and as such, it should be in a situation where it can cause the most destruction possible. Outside a key city or erupting out of the ground where a sacred temple stood are both excellent choices that heighten the drama of the encounter by needing to have the PCs act like the superheroes they are, and simultaneously fight the Tarrasque while trying to keep it from destroying and killing everything around them. This added drama has an extra use as well, allowing spellcasters to use their spells in guaranteed effective ways when saving people, so they don't have to always choose to deal with the creature's spell-reflective hide. This creates a dynamic scene where there are fearless warriors going toe-to-toe with a monstrosity that can level cities, but needs to focus to fight these individuals, while the spellcasters are aiding the fight and trying to protect the citizenry and land around them all at the same time. You should remember to have the Tarrasque use Swallow Whole whenever possible to hamper major threats, as well as give a player the opportunity to bust out of the fearsome creature's gullet. Occasionally, the Tarrasque also needs to make an effort to threaten the spellcasters who are peppering it from afar, just so the tension of the battle stays high. The Tarrasque is on a level that it needs to be the ultimate, or at least penultimate, threat that the party faces, because there are not many more difficult enemies to face without going into Demon Prince or God territory. That being said, a DM needs to realize that while the Tarrasque is an incredible threat, it is by no means a good villain. The Tarrasque has no will outside of wanton destruction, and its movements need to reflect that. The Tarrasque isn't even truly malicious, it just provides its function as a destroyer of things. This means that when planning a campaign with a Tarrasque as one of its major endgame threats, you need to do two things to get an emotional and narrative payoff at the end. The first is making sure the Tarrasque is not sudden and has been built up over time as a threat. This allows the players to feel exactly how fucked they are when it finally wakes up. The other is figuring out why the Tarrasque is in this scenario, and this usually takes the form of a who. Who decided to wake the Tarrasque and why? This who can either be powerful in their own right and doing something which leads to a final confrontation while the Tarrasque attack is going on, or they can be a relative weakling who's managed to con and work in the shadows enough to release the Tarrasque. These offer very different payoffs. The former gives players the satisfaction of finally killing the powerful one responsible for all of this destruction, and managing to take on impossible odds not once, but twice. The second gives the battered PCs the catharsis of wailing on someone who needed this giant monster to do their dirty work, and the players get to show them exactly what happens when they don't have a literal world-ending threat to protect them. The most important element here is that there is someone that actually reacts to the players in the end, someone who can see their demise coming and knows that it is a terrible fate that awaits them. Because just saving the world from a monster is a simple victory which won't leave most groups entirely satisfying. They want to see the evil crushed. They want to see the person that let this destruction go destroyed themselves. The Tarrasque is one of the most feared, most iconic monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, and I've loved it since I was 9 years old. I grew up with D&D, reading the 3.5 Monster Manual cover to cover, and dreaming about the time I'd finally get to run games that featured some of these incredible creatures. Even though it was with the far inferior 4th edition version, it was still a dream come true the first time I got to use the Tarrasque in a game. I fucking love monsters, and I hope all of you out there do too, because I've got a lot more Monster Manual Mondays on the way. Hopefully you learned something and were also entertained by this first video on one of the greats, and hopefully you'll be ready as a DM and as a player for when the Tarrasque is upon you.